Good evening from southern Spain. It is cold, it is dark, but here you are, warming my heart. It's good to have you. Thank you so much for being here. I appreciate the fact that you made it. Right. Tonight's live stream was inspired by a comment, and specifically a comment once again from the all-inspiring Blaze. Let me show you what the comment is about, and then we'll get to the largest orchid in the world. So Blaze, on the live stream that aired yesterday about dormancy, came with another comment with regards to temperature and watering, you know, when we were talking about cold and wet and how things differ between them. Then she mentioned I had a dendrobium and sphagnum moss, or she supposedly believes, has heard, that they hate sphagnum moss around their roots. Excuse my throat. Is that true? So that's going to be the main body of conversation tonight. And again, it is a conversation which I would like to consider in form of a dialogue. And because of this dialogue, you are always welcome to please stop what I'm saying if you have any questions, to then come up onto the panel and let's talk about it. Any questions, I can drop a link into the chat, and then you click the link and bingo, you're up here. You don't need to put your camera on unless you want to show an orchid that you are in doubt about, but no cameras necessary. Privacy for me is key. However, of course, if there's something you want to show, either you can send me an email, which is ninjaorchids@gmail.com, Let me just type that in to the chat. And if you want that picture, if you want to send a picture, I can always show it on the stream in case you are shy. I understand that. For some reason, I'm nervous tonight, which is not a good thing because the nerves make my head go into a tailspin and make my hands go a little bit shaky. So forgive me for any kind of, talking in circles. That is why this is interactive. The moment you see me going off on a tangent that is maybe not on the subject, or you're not sure I'm going to circle back to the subject, stop me, interrupt me, and bring me back to where we were headed in the first place. Interactive means this is about you and I can respond to you immediately. It also means that your voice should be heard without time zones and me waiting for comments to come in and then responding, etc. Now, speaking of time zones, I know it's a bit difficult because we are all so widespread, but I'm trying to stagger the lives according to different time zones. And tonight we are a little bit later than we were yesterday, and so on and so forth. Right. With that being said, I wanted to venture into dreamland, and if space is not an issue in your grow space, I would like to know why you do not have Grammatophyllum speciosum. Now, I'm not a big fan of Wikipedia. Honestly, I'm not. However, I can only say that for a quick gaze at this beautiful giant-sized orchid, then why not go to Wikipedia? It is pretty straightforward if I can find my tab. Why are you not showing? Anyway, let me share this one so you get an idea of what I'm talking about. And another thing is, please forgive me if during the conversation I'm referring mainly to meters because we're talking meters when it comes to size, as opposed to the blooms are centimeters. I do apologize. I hope that my conversions are as approximate to close as possible. But look at this. The Grammatophyllum speciosum is considered the largest orchid ever. So far as I'm concerned, from everything I've researched in the past, yeah, it can grow up to, well, let's just say normal culture, 3 meters. So 1 meter, 2 meters, I'm almost 2 meters tall. That's one, it's big. If you just look at the tree that it is on, let's check out this tree right here and get that picture a little bit closer. Let's see if I can increase that image. It's loading. Of course, I have a lot of tabs open, so I don't have the luxury of, let me see if this will work. No, it doesn't work. Anyway, I hope that you do somehow get the picture. I have quite a few tabs open for tonight, so if I upload, everything starts to stall. But look at the size of this tree in comparison to the orchid on it. It is amazing. Even the bloom spikes can get up to 100 blooms on it, and each bloom measures 10 centimeters across. 10, I don't know, is that 3 inches? Maybe around about 3 inches. Highly fragrant. But there's something very special about this orchid, apart from its enormous size, is the fact that the lower blooms do not have a lip, or let's just say they don't have the organs for pollination. They are mainly the attractors to the pollinators by way of fragrance. So the fragrance itself is generated at the lower blooms of the spike, and then the entire pollena and everything that happens with the lip and the column manifests itself the higher the blooms go up the spike. So this orchid, you're welcome. If you see this in your shopping cart, make absolutely sure that you have the space. Let's put it that way. Now, the beauty about this orchid is that it can, oh, here we go. I've got my measurement converter up. It can also grow up to 7 meters if you're going to go really good with your conditions. That's 25 feet. Excuse my throat. That is 25 feet of growth. If you see this in your cart and you like the blooms because they remind you of an Ansellia africana, let me recommend to you buy the Ansellia africana if you do not have space to accommodate what this orchid is going to be like. But isn't it just amazing? I mean, I'm just going to highlight a few images. At least you can see the assortment of images. But here's a display that you can easily replicate in your yard. Now, again, the beauty of this orchid is the fact that it can go down to freezing temperatures. It is that resilient. You know, ideally, you don't want to push it that far. But if you got 5 degrees to 41 degrees Fahrenheit, 5 degrees Celsius, this orchid can easily live outside. Now, it has never been my ambition to grow a Grammatophyllum speciosum in my climate, but maybe you've heard about my east side in the corner where I would like to have a Dendrobium speciosum. Doesn't even cover the size of this. This one dwarfs a Dendrobium speciosum. But isn't that just insane? I mean, wow. It's also called the giant tiger orchid, the sugarcane orchid, or the queen of orchids. So we had the Queen of Sheba last night out there in Australia. And tonight we've got the Queen of Orchids in general, and she is native to a big variety of regions, but mainly Laos, Myanmar, Thailand, Borneo, Indonesia, all the islands around there, Malaysia, including also Philippines, all the way to the Solomon Islands. And it's also recorded in the Guinness Book of World Records as the world's tallest, largest orchid. Now, believe it or not, clearly, as we can see on the pictures where it is cultivated in a tree, it's an epiphyte. So you can only imagine the expanse and the size of the roots. I mean, oh, I don't know. That looks to me like some kind of a thorn tree. I don't know, maybe an acacia or something. I know that in Kenya, our thorn trees look similar to this in their trunks, like an umbrella, but that is insane. The weight of some of these orchids can reach up to a ton. And she's a vigorous grower. How about that? Perfect, right? Exactly, Fernanda. Ideal for us. Now, imagine if you had a space in your garden and you see something and you buy it and you see it as you pot this one cane up because they are super, super vigorous. Just know that's not how it's going to stay. And know that the diameter of each growth as it grows is approximately 5 centimeters. That is quite a big one. That's more than, what, 2 inches, round about there? That is the diameter of the stem. But if you are in love with the blooms as such, I would say they have a similarity to some Ansellia africanas that we have seen, but you can also see that, well, in this case, there's a lip. And I find it fascinating then that we have a bloom at the bottom that is mainly serving a purpose to attract the pollinators, has no lip, nothing at all, and then the fragrance drifts upwards towards the blooms, and that is where the pollination structures, everything are located. I am enthralled by this. Here we go, out there in the pasture. If you've got an empty field, I mean, the possibilities are endless. So you can see here, just to be fair, the proportions of the greenhouse you would need to accommodate one that will actually grow within a certain limit of, 3 meters. Like I said, if you do really, really well, that pot is going to have to be much lower so that you can accommodate its eventual height. Incredible. It's got the trash basket roots as well, What's not to love? Let's look at the proportions next to humans. I mean, seriously, as far as I can see in the picture next to these human beings, that is on a crane. There's something hoisting that orchid up. So do not underestimate what you see in the images until you see it next to some human beings. In this case, they're putting it in a basket. I don't know why. That basket, it's wood. Okay, it seems like they know what they're doing. I would be extremely, extremely cautious about what I would put this orchid in. But isn't this just fabulous? I suppose it was successful because they hoisted it up and there it lives. Wow. Just wow. Isn't that amazing? I don't know about you, but things like this, I go down rabbit holes and yes, well, here you are with me going down a rabbit hole. Now you can see the entire specimen hoisted up to the ceiling of that greenhouse and look at the humans below. Amazing. So just know what you're up against. Don't go by the blooms alone, but the blooms being 10 centimeters across and getting to 100 per spike. Wow. I just have no words. So yes, there you go. Grammatophyllum speciosum, the tallest, largest, whatever, probably the heaviest orchid as well. We could tie up a swing for the kids. Exactly, Daniel. Exactly. Oh, can you imagine seeing a new growth coming out of that and saying, I've got a new growth and then there's 5 more to follow? Wouldn't that be just a delight to have? Ah, I can't tell you how, my eyes weep. I'm just going to show you the structure of this beauty. That pot already looks a little bit too small. Wishful thinking, I would say, for whoever put that in the pot. That's a young one, just FYI. Wow. I just can't. These things, they make my nights when I sit in alone and just browse, let's just say. So I came across that and I thought I would share that with you and see what you have to say about it. Let me just see something here that I didn't notice before. Oh, yes. Let me just highlight this because I didn't see this earlier on. This is what you may get in the mail. Okay? You have been warned. Desiree, it's so good to see you. So good to see you. Thank you so much for coming. There is no need. This is like a city bus. You hop on, you've got a ticket for the night. You hop on, go to your destination, hop off if you must. If the bus is still going around, hop back on at any time. This is how we do here. Yes, so this is a speciosum. As you might get it in the mail. If you're lucky, it'll be double or triple the size. This is a seedling, all right? Do not be in any way, shape, or form confused by what you're up against. So I just can't. I just can't. Look at these images. If you're lucky, you might get a couple more growths. Oh, but be warned. Don't tell me I didn't warn you. If you ever acquire such a beauty, or if you are watching this on replay and are actually growing such a beauty, please, please let me know in the comments. And well, if you've got it, email me some pictures. Look at this one. I don't want to get carried away, but look at this one. Wow. I wonder why people in Florida don't grow more of these out in their garden. I mean, hello. I would. Just amazing. Even check this out. In bloom. let me just take a drink of water. Fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. Okay. Not to be confused with Dendrobium speciosum. Dendrobium speciosum, next to this one, is a miniature. Okay, I've got a bit of a tickle in my throat, so I do apologize when I mute on occasions. I don't want to be doing that too much, but I also don't want to be coughing away into the microphone. I hope the sound is all right. I hope that we've got everything under control here. And what I want to do now is go to something I prepared for this evening. I know it's only a little brief thing, but we're going to expand on this. But it's something that has always had me, the first time I ever started to study or look into orchids and what can I grow in my space, I hated hearing in the care guides cool, intermediate, and warm. I hated reading that because my cool is not the same as your cool or anybody else's cool. So I get cold when my temperatures drop below 60 degrees Fahrenheit. That's about 15 degrees Celsius. That's when I start to get cold. Put me into single digits in Celsius and there is war. Do not speak to me. I get grumpy. My body is telling me it's objecting to all of that. So, for somebody else living in another climate, that is not even cool. Okay. So that frustrated me. So I went to a deep dive and I thought maybe this could be of interest for anybody that sort of says the same thing. They don't like to ask the question because they think they should know. Well, I hope that this helps because to my understanding, when it comes to orchids, the temperature references are for cool orchids, night preferences 10 degrees Celsius and the day 15 degrees Celsius, and they like a lot of light. Now, the notes are very, very basic. This is about the temperatures, because at the end of the day, when we talk about temperatures, we also have to keep in mind humidity. But the temperatures are important because any orchid that cannot survive below the minimum, including the maximum, and we have a margin of tolerance, and the tolerance is determined by humidity and airflow. So this is not to say that an orchid that only can go down to 10 degrees Celsius cannot do well in 5 degrees Celsius. And please convert according, these are examples, all right? I'm just giving examples. I'm going to stick with Celsius just so that I don't fall off track. So it doesn't mean they can't go a little bit lower, but these are safe brackets. I don't like to put out information that goes a little bit into the risque. I don't. Especially if I'm putting information on a public platform and people would follow it and then say, that didn't work for me. So my degrees here, you can fluctuate to a plus minus of 5 degrees Celsius. That is a temperature tolerance that is often talked about, but the temperature tolerance can only ever be determined and shown and defined once you have the orchid in your collection. It's a guess. But if you can have an orchid at 10 degrees Celsius and maintain that, you are pretty much certain your orchid is going to do absolutely fine, no matter the humidity, no matter the airflow. Okay, so humidity and airflow will only factor in when you're pushing an orchid to an extreme, be it the cold to the highest temperature. All right, humidity is a cooling effect. So what you will see when you see here, for example, cool orchids, note they like a lot of light. That is because normally they are at high altitude where if they are growing on the ground, there's hardly any shrub around them to provide them with any protection from the sun. In my case, Rupiculus laelius is an example I can throw at you based on what I grow in my collection. Others are at high altitude, but they are in the canopies of the trees that lose their foliage during the winter and boom, are exposed to a lot of light. Now, if they grow in the canopies of the trees in temperatures that drop down to 10 degrees Celsius, then of course, now we need to understand how much humidity do they have in order to survive below that in your climate. And that is something that then is determined when you dig deeper into the specific orchid you are looking for. You can take these temperature margins as a guideline and then also match the humidity levels you can provide, especially when it comes for cool growing orchids. The humidity has to be higher for the higher temperatures, in our case 15 degrees Celsius. Now, I'm still cold at that temperature. If that's the highest temperature for a cold growing orchid, I don't want it in my collection. There is no way by choice for an orchid I'm going to do that. I love it. I'll grow vicariously, so to speak. But as the higher we go with any orchid that we are trying to see how temperature tolerant is, the humidity will always be the cooling factor, including airflow. If you don't have enough humidity, but you have plenty of airflow, it is possible that your orchid is going to show some browning at the tips unless you have a setup that accommodates a lot of water so that the browning of the tips doesn't even start. But the perspiration, transpiration through the leaves without the humidity and then wind, airflow, but even if it isn't hot, I'm talking temperature tolerance, 15 degrees Celsius, that wind can be quite nippy, and dry wind, if you're out there on the ski slopes in the sun, even though it's low temperatures, it's still cozy and warm in the corner. You've got your blanket and you've got your hot drink or whatever. It is very warm there, but it is a very dry air and you feel it against your skin. And that is the moisturizer then you put on your skin to avoid it from drying out, including chapstick. That is the humidity around an orchid that is a cool grower. If it doesn't have enough humidity, things will start to frazzle, dry, and crack, just like your skin would in those kinds of conditions. And I hope I'm making sense. Let me have a look-see. For example, Nelson has an amazing Zygopetalum considered a cold orchid, but he lives in Florida. How can it be? Airflow and humidity. Dania. In Florida, there's plenty of airflow and there's plenty of humidity, and the humidity cools the orchid down. A Zygopetalum in my climate has a real hard time to struggle with my hot, dry winds. Now, they've done better this year because my summer was extremely mild. You can really push temperature tolerance if you have humidity and airflow. Airflow cools, but it won't cool enough if you've got a cold grower in high temperatures. But the humidity, high humidity combined with high airflow, that is like an air conditioner. I hope that makes sense. I'm quite new to orchids, so this will be my second winter with them. Last winter I gave them artificial light additional to window daylight. This year that will not happen. Okay. Okay. Is that a question? Is there something I can clarify? Why is it not happening? I mean, I don't supplement mine with light anymore just because of the cost factor. But I can tell you from the worst spring I have ever had. Look, winter, I will accept bad climate here. But from the worst spring I have ever had, I have lost a few orchids, yes, but not as much as I thought I would. Thank you, Dania, for that feedback. I appreciate that. Thank you. And that is what I mentioned earlier, your tolerance, temperature tolerance. That's why you hear a lot of people say, oh, I can grow this orchid very, very well in my climate. And the next person says, I can't. Okay, now we have to consider setup. But before you even consider setup, because wet-dry cycle works for 90% of the orchids that we grow without specialized facilities and installations, then 90% of them will grow. Then we have to say, well, how much humidity have you got? How much airflow have you got? And then you can pretty much determine if you're saying, well, why can't I grow them, but I'm an indoor grower? You can pretty much figure out what it is you're lacking, what you need more of. Right, so here's the thing. Right at the bottom, I have humidity breakdown. Before we go, will this affect the growth? No, it won't. Okay, Desiree, less light, okay? If you have less light, like what I had in the spring of this year, it's a bit scary because we know we want to do the best for our orchids, but they are resilient, okay? So there's one thing we have to accept in circumstances like these. We have to accept that if an orchid is in active growth during the time period where there is less light, the growth will continue to develop. It'll just be a little bit shorter. And it may not bloom, okay? Now, in circumstances that can't afford, or let's say that's not a good word, but in circumstances where giving more light to the orchid is not possible, at least we can make sure that the orchid lives through that phase and comes out safely at the other end. Okay, your leaves will get a little bit darker, but that's fine. That's fine. On some orchids, they should be dark. They shouldn't be so bright. But some orchids like the Laelia purpurata, for example, that has more of a yellowy greenish leaf if it gets plenty of light, those leaves will darken a little bit, but it's not a detriment to the orchid at all. And let me tell you something, the moment, because you see the hormones start to get stored in the orchid, but the moment conditions start to be more favorable, those orchids will kick into action. They do better than we expect, okay? I was completely freaked out in the spring because I had never seen, even me personally, if I wasn't growing orchids, I had never seen anything like it, to have 8 to 12 weeks, close to 12 weeks of terrible conditions and terrible temperatures. Now, if it was cloudy, but the temperatures were warming up, that's fine. But I had the double whammy for a period of almost 3 months plus the winter. So let's make that a 5-month period. My weaker orchids didn't make it. And another weak orchid that I thought was strong, turns out a virus, I think, managed to get hold because the orchid was struggling. That is an evolution process in our collection. As much as we hate it happening, we have to accept the reality of this hobby, that it is what it is. However, by weeding out, it's the process of natural selection. By having this happen, we understand what we can't grow in future, so we stay away from that, and we get a better understanding of what we can grow. So I was always a person, and I used to pride myself in this, that I used to always say, I cover worst case scenario, and with that, I'm set. I was schooled, because there was never in my lifetime where I couldn't put the lights on, ever. No, I didn't cover worst case scenario. I just cruised right in, opened that door, did the installations, and thought we are ready to grow from here on in. Never in a million years did I think circumstances would change. Now, having gotten over the initial shock, I still have PTSD from it, but having gotten over the initial shock, I am starting to understand my collection is going to evolve based on my conditions. And with that, the confidence grows again. Know that many of the orchids that we buy on the commercial market also are bred for vigor and for blooming. So if you're not really honed in on a species, or your collection isn't mainly species orchids, you may find yourself in the situation your orchids are not going to be bothered at all, because the market has interbred so many different characteristics of the parents that make an orchid pretty much resilient unless they get taken out by pests. Okay? So I know this was a very long-winded answer, but what I want to do is reassure people that it can be done. No matter how much you see on the internet with lights and this and that, and then you've got the foot candles and blah, blah, blah. That can get overwhelming, and very quickly in my case, we think we're not doing our orchids justice, we're not this and we're not that. Meanwhile, the orchids have been around much, much longer, and what we're trying to do is make sure that we get orchids into our environment that can stay and be okay, if that makes sense. I do count my photo and temps during the winter. Yeah. I mean, an enclosed case, that is just, that's the cat's meow. Honestly, anybody allergic to cats, it's just a saying. It's a figure of speech. Yeah, I love the idea of the enclosed space as well. Very, very much. But anyway, good. I'm glad that makes sense. I want to encourage. I do not want people to be scared of things. Exactly. That is exactly right, Robert. And it's nice to have what I've been seeing as well, these IKEA cabinets, this, that, and the other. I mean, personally, I'm not getting another piece of furniture into my home, but there are options out there that where you can say, the Biorb and this and that, which is a mini thing for high price. I wouldn't buy it, but you can make an aquarium, a DIY aquarium, and make it a closed case or something like that. But at for the beginning stages, I wouldn't even delve into that. I would be absolutely sure that what I've got is what I can handle, and then the parameters will broaden all by themselves automatically. So I'm glad that I made some sense, Desiree. Thank you. Wink, wink. So yeah, so you see the humidity breakdown. When somebody says, there's another thing that used to frustrate me because coming from Kenya, gosh, give me 85, 90% humidity. And that for me is normal. And airflow is important. Absolutely. Because if you have high humidity and no airflow, boom, you've got rot. So these two go hand in hand. Airflow, humidity, both are cooling. And depending on the orchid, that's why zygopetalums can survive in Florida. Now, the thing here with the humidity factor, if you ever see this as you research or as you look around and somebody says something, oh, I have very low humidity, like I always say that, and then I add 30% on average. So if you take a screenshot of this or something and crop it, low humidity is anything below 50%. And this is on a year's average. Medium, 50 to 70%, and in the medium range, 95% of the orchids that we grow will be just fine. So that's the medium range. Anything above 75% is high, and I'm talking average. So you will, with 75%, to get that average, you're going to be pretty up there, and eventually maybe you go down to 60% as well. But 75% on up normally is where we find our warm to hot growers. I'm jumping a little bit ahead, but let's go to intermediate orchids. So these intermediate orchids with medium percentage of humidity are the ones 90% of us grow, bar any itty bitty little exceptions, as I mentioned in the last live, dormancy and all that business. But what we grow as indoor growers in general falls under the category of intermediate. We can go through the entire genus pool and select a whole gaggle of orchids out of every single genus that fits into 15 degrees Celsius as a minimum at preference, and 21 for the day. Now, 21 still sounds pretty cool to me, but you see, some people growing indoors have their AC on, and it works. I would say 60 and 70. Oh, I've got a mistake over here. My bad, let's fix that. These temperatures with the AC on, isn't that what normally would be an AC? So you see, that works perfectly. However, now match that with whatever orchid you're talking about, and you go down to medium humidity. You will need that, because otherwise you are just blowing dry air at your orchids, and then again you've got drying of the tips, etc., which can also be confused with excessive fertilizer, but that'll be another subject on another night. And that I'm just talking humidity and temperature so that we can find the balance between everything that we read about care. Okay, so warm to hot growing orchids, now you see how high the humidity gets. When we're talking warm to hot growing orchids, 75% and up. And at the bottom of this should be airflow, airflow, airflow. Not once is airflow excluded in any of these examples, all right? The airflow cools everybody down. The airflow will allow you to also get your temperature tolerant orchids gauged in. It'll make you be able to grow an orchid in your climate with the humidity that you have, as opposed to somebody else with the same temperatures that doesn't have that humidity. All right. So I find it pretty important here to, when I see warm to hot growing orchids in the category of 23 degrees Celsius, another mistake, we're proofreading as we go. When you see, if you've taken a screenshot by now, erase it, take another one. I'm sorry. But when you see the warm to hot growing and they say the preference is 23 degrees Celsius, now to me that's still pretty cool. And I go all the way up to 40 degrees, which is about 104 degrees Fahrenheit. But there, my setup plays a big factor because I can provide a little microclimate around the orchid, around the pot, in order to accommodate that they just don't burn to a crisp, especially with my hot, dry winds. That's a little detail. If setup and all that is of interest, I can also schedule a live specifically how to balance a setup based on your environment, give some kind of tips, maybe some kind of recipe guides. This setup would work well with this combination of climate environment, be it indoor, outdoor. I can do that. I'm not sure. You see these lives, I can go as detailed as I want, city bus, hop on, hop off, etc. So this is the combination of cool, being able to tolerate with a lot of airflow, high humidity, and hot growers being able to grow in warm temperatures that have high humidity and airflow because it's a cooling effect. Hi, Danny. It's good to see you. Thank you for being here. Let me just get a sip of water. I'm sorry. Okay, very typical case you've got there, Danny. That's very typical, especially in the fall and winter. Okay, Dania has still got rot 24 hours. Okay, I need to know, in that case, in your case, Dania, I need to know that how high is your humidity? Because it could not just be the humidity, it could be a lack of calcium in your fertilizing regime. You are welcome, Danny. Thank you for being here. Let me know if you want about your fertilizing regime, because we can do a live just about fertilizer. All right. So you have low humidity, very typical for this time of year. Some fans, but they dry out way too fast. And of course, being an indoor grower, as I assume, because you've got fans, that means you can't crank up the humidity. 70% humidity. That is insane, Dania. That is ideal. That's a great range. That's right, Robert. Thank you. The airflow could be too high. Lower speed at lower intervals. Dania, 70% humidity is ideal. So there's something else happening here where your temperatures may be a little bit, could they be a little bit too low? Yeah. Yeah, me too, Danny. I have that as well. I don't even use any fans. I don't use fans at all. I've stopped. I do open my terrace door when my outside temperatures match the inside temperatures, and I don't do that for very long during the really testing temperatures, the testing times. So if you've got a window where you can open and at least get some fresh air in, try that. But Dania, there's something else going on with your environment. If your temperatures are too low, maybe for those fans to be running, or there's a calcium, there's a supplementation, a fertilization problem there. I don't want to skip I don't want to skip. I just want to make sure tonight I have a 15-second lag in the stream. So as I speak, I'm still waiting. You know, you guys are the future. Rio State. Robert, you are throwing out lingo. I haven't even heard of that before. I would throw out a link for you, Robert, if you want to come up and explain that. Dania, yes, it does. Super, super important. Hey, Anita, it's good to see you. So good to see you. Thank you for coming. Dania, that is important. I have a video which I can't right now change the screen and link up into the chat. I have a video about fertilization, calcium, and you know who does what, especially deficiencies. There's a I would like to see if you don't mind, I am going to check my back studio and try and find it for you. Let me see, because there's one about deficiencies, and that goes specifically with examples. And it shows you the leaves as I had. Hey, Brea, it's good to see you. Hi. Let me go and see. Let me go. Was it deficiencies? Oh, I want to help you right now. Okay, I'm going to ask you please to check out my playlists, be it in Orchid Lingo. And there is a video about CalMag. There is a video about CalMag on my playlists. It's all there. Dania, if you want, after the stream, maybe tomorrow, whenever, drop me a comment below the screen and I'm going to throw some links in there, okay? Yes, you can. Yes, you can. 60 parts per million is fine. Absolutely. Not a problem. You're an indoor grower. You've got the right temperatures. It's fine. It's safe for you. For someone in my position that doesn't have, you know, the capabilities, I would actually stop from doing that when we get into December, January, but now it's soon enough. Absolutely. And do the first one at 60 parts per million. Do that twice within 2 weeks. Skip any fertilizing. Get the calcium in there first, and then just continue on and make it a once a month regime. Danny, my 1,000 cats and paths don't seem to mind the low humidity that much. Oncidiums will suffer. My goodness, the Oncidium leaves to some degree because of their structure. You should see my Colmonara Masai Red, that whole thing. I mean, she blooms, she does well, which is one of the genus out of the gaggle of everything. Thank you, Robert. Out of the gaggle of everything, the Oncidiums with low humidity will struggle. If they still bloom for you, though, take heart and just focus on that. Don't cut off any of the tips just to make her look pretty, because by the time you cut off the tip that has dried out, now you've also created a new tip and that will dry out. If you can live with it and accept it, it's just a little bit of a browning on the tip. That's not a problem. Even my Colmonara outside, she gets some spotting, but hey, she's growing well and she blooms for me. I've just come to accept that I'm not growing for shows. That's how I get around it. Yeah, and that's the story of the paths. Slow, so slow, slow. That's what they do. And Desiree, do not fertilize them in any way, shape, or form, thinking that you can speed it up. I made that mistake with my first paths because I didn't grow them before this collection arrived. And I thought, well, my climate is warmer. I can fertilize a little bit. And I mean a little bit. I didn't go over the top. And boom, incurred leaf tip burn. So don't fertilize them. They'll be fine. Eventually, they'll show you another leaf. Eventually. Is there a difference between calcium or nitrate calcium, or the same thing? There is a difference. Calcium nitrate has nitrogen in it, which boosts growth. So if your growths are rotting, let's just say new growths need calcium nitrate because, of course, they're growing. And new growths are the ones that are more prone to rot. And for that reason, in a controlled environment, it really doesn't matter because you can apply calcium nitrate to an orchid in active growth with a new growth starting because it's got nitrogen in it, and that is fabulous. If you want to put calcium into an orchid that doesn't have rot, I wouldn't do that unless you see calcium deficiency, happening in the past and now you're waiting for a new growth. So you have to, if the orchid is in active growth, give it calcium nitrate. Absolutely fine. Perfect. I use calcium nitrate during my growing season most of the time. I hope that makes sense, and I hope that answered the question. So in my case, different spots have microclimates, some more humid, others drier. Place plant. Yes, absolutely. Placement of plants is also quite important. And if you can avoid the dry areas, I don't know if anybody still works with radiators, but that used to be my grandma's things. And I remember her orchids always looking a little bit strange. I know now why, but yeah, placement is important. Just as much as your light source is important as to where, in my case, without artificial lights, how I place my orchids, then when it comes to humidity, it's exactly the same thing as well. Goody, Danya. And and anybody, as I'm going through what I'm saying, if this is thought-provoking, when the stream airs, there are still comments. You can keep adding questions and down below, and I can be much more efficient in finding the adequate links to point you in the direction of the videos instead of here now trying to find them and, fumbling over my words. So if this happens and then when you watch it the next time, when you wake up in the morning and you think, wait, what did she say? Throw a comment underneath the video, okay? And we can continue the dialogue down there. Just like Blaze's comment inspired this live, I had something else planned, but when I talk about interactive, I mean interactive. I want to get back to you as soon as possible. When I started this channel, it was almost like saving one orchid at a time. If I can save one per day, my job is done. So the waiting game can be a headache, and I love doing personalized videos, and I'll continue to do that. But these live streams give me an opportunity to go bang, 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 bang. This was something that's important, and this is something that can also, be important for many, many other people as well, because it is such a big and variable environment. Thank you for the heart. Right back at you, Danya. So yeah, now, Blaze's comment had a little add-on. Thank you, Fernanda. I appreciate that so much. I really, really do. I was nervous for today for some reason. My goodness, I don't know what was writing me, but I appreciate that. Thank you. Now, where's Blaze's comment? Because when it comes to temperatures, hey, Bittersalz. Hey, Anna, it's good to see you. Well, okay, it tastes disgusting. You won't use it for your orchids. All right. Your orchids don't have taste buds, but I think you know that. And I'm trying to see if there's anything else in between the lines. I don't want to read too far into those lines, but if there's another reason why you're not using Epsom salt, then please let me know, because I do for not just soaks. I don't use it for flushing at all. Danny, my Sherry baby does pretty well. Had 3 spikes, but the leaves aren't great. Well, there you go, and she still smells like chocolate, I betcha, right? My goodness, no, don't cut the leaves. It's just going to frazzle the next cut. I'm not even talking about infections. Oncidium don't get infections through the leaves because you cut the tips off. It's just going to make another area ready to be frazzled off. I don't, even with my twinkles in my climate, well, I hope the one that I have will live, but I didn't cut the tips off. It's, you know, it just, yeah. You see, that's all you need to know. It smelled amazing. So happy days. Your sherry baby is doing great. All right, so yeah, I use Epsom salts as well, but I do not flush my orchids with Epsom salts. That is just a personal preference. I just like to put plain water through it because we are going to be talking a little bit about, let's say, cold temperatures and a setup. All right, simply because it's part of Blaze's comment, and I thought it was super interesting because as we are talking about humidity and the different temperature differentials, she said she heard dendrobiums hate sphagnum moss around their roots, and if that is true. And of course, here we are. It's classic. It's the orchid hobby. Welcome. The answer is yes and no. What did you expect? Of course. Now, yes and no. Every orchid, I did this in the reply to her so she didn't have to wait for the live. I put this in the reply. Every orchid hates to have, let's say, sphagnum moss around the roots if the conditions aren't accordingly. All right. Sphagnum moss is very water retentive. It takes, especially during the winter, or let me just say, especially during cold temperatures, it will take forever to dry out. Now, some dendrobiums don't care because we've got dendrobiums that are hot growers, and those are, for example, the Dendrobium phalaenopsis. They don't like, let's go to the temperatures again, they don't like temperatures below 60 degrees Fahrenheit at night. So if you've got a Dendrobium phalaenopsis or any warm to hot growing orchid in sphagnum moss, and you go below anything that they prefer temperature wise, they're going to hate it. Those roots are going to go. It's going to be a phalaenopsis, it can be a cattleya, and in her case, her question was about dendrobiums. And it has nothing to do with the sphagnum moss. The sphagnum moss wasn't the culprit. It was the low temperatures. So we have to be careful, and that's why I didn't necessarily go into a setup live tonight. I went into a temperature live tonight because this is the foundation of every successful setup for 90% of the orchids that we grow. You can grow an epiphytic orchid in just about anything if you respect the temperature lows and then make sure that, of course, you got your fertilizer and all that business. But sphagnum moss also has a reputation, just like leca, to have an evaporative cooling effect. Sandy, can't you see? Ay. Excuse me, I need some water. So good to have you. Hand heart, Sandy, it's so good to have you. So, sphagnum moss has a reputation, just like leca, to have an evaporative cooling effect. Sorry about the dogs, that's not my stomach. That's the dogs. Try to settle them down. And yes, to a degree that is true. However, when it comes to evaporative cooling with sphagnum moss, it is only exterior, all right? If somebody were to put a thermometer and say, oh, my sphagnum moss is XYZ temperature on the outside of the pot, the inside will always be a little bit warmer. So it doesn't matter that we need to get into the specifics, but I thought I would throw that little point out there because somebody might stumble across the fact sphagnum moss has evaporative cooling. And then you're thinking, well, wait, I thought leca did that. Yes, well, leca has evaporative cooling, but just like sphagnum moss, if it's worse on the outside of the pot than it is on the inside will always cool down slower than the outside. Clearly, just like with any other pot, if you leave it outside. In the meantime, though, sphagnum moss will also dry out faster on the outside than it does inside. So the core of the pot will never ever really get too low. Yes, they do seem to like tight pots. That is so true. I don't personally own a Shari baby, but I know that I should own one because I have a whole list of people, especially one person that's going to do a care collab only if I have a Shari baby. How can I reply to Danny C? Would like to know how she uses it. She uses what? I don't want to interfere if there's a conversation going on inside the chat. You can reply to Danny C within the chat, Anna Reiter. So anyway, that thing about the sphagnum moss, just make sure that you do not overstep the lowest temperature for an orchid if you've got it in sphagnum moss, and then it will be fine. Anything below what a temperature tolerant orchid would prefer, yes, they're going to hate sphagnum moss, but it has nothing to do with dendrobiums. When it comes to a wet-dry cycle, however, with sphagnum moss, it becomes a little bit more of a dance during the winter to keep those roots from getting too wet for too long, because the velamen has a different characteristics, and everything is hunky-dory and absorbing like crazy during the growing phase and the warmer months of the year. And then the velamen is like, gimme, 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 and sphagnum moss is perfect. As soon as the temperatures start to drop, though, the velamen also stops its functionality because the job of the orchid and the velamen is done. And that is when we have to really tiptoe around what we do with any orchid in sphagnum moss during the winter if you're growing in a wet-dry cycle. And that's why I always like to refer, when people say water sparingly, what does that even mean? I mean, I can have a very small pot and I'm watering sparingly. What does it mean? Think of yourself, you are the Jew. So if you have a big pot and there's sphagnum moss in it, you can't deprive an orchid, but you don't want to soak the pot. And there's no harm, no foul for the period of time where the orchid is not in active growth to stay on the safe side, avoid any unnecessary salt accumulation, and just either mist or give a little trickle of water. Please do not use ice cubes, okay? But if people say, well, the quantity helps me, I'm not overwatering my orchid, well, then let me just say 1/4 of a cup for a small pot, 1/2 a cup for a medium-sized pot, and a full cup of water for a large-sized pot. End of story. For the winter months, when it comes to not depriving your orchid of water, if that makes sense. So temperature and moisture-wise, are my terracotta? Yes, they are. Absolutely. Desiree, not a problem. Terracotta, of course, has evaporative cooling. That's fine. I just want to know now, if you've told me in the past, please remind me. Are you growing in organic, inorganic? Let me know what media is in those pots and I can be more specific. What is wrong? Yeah, it's going to need to be reported. I'm scared because it's so root bound. Okay, Danny, let me tell you something about a Shari baby. You can hardly destroy a healthy Shari baby. What you can do to be 100% on the safe side is wait for new roots to show at the base of a new growth. And then you can be much more confident if you do some destruction around the root ball. And on top of that, if you don't want to go all ninja, hey, you called. If you don't want to go all ninja on your Shari baby root system, if it is so root bound, who cares what's in the middle? Who cares? There is no need to untangle everything. Imagine that you're doing a cymbidium that has these big, massive, fleshy roots. You can be there 24 hours. You can wear a headlamp and be untangling cymbidium roots to remove old media. Just look at some of Fernanda's videos. I mean, she goes in there and I'm, she's like ripping that root ball apart. But that's fine. The orchid is vigorous. It is strong. It has plenty of growth. And new roots come, you're good to go. And you won't set the orchid back. Now, if you say you're going to be dividing it in that process, just make sure that you've got plenty of orchid to work with for the division so that the structures that are remaining in the division can provide everything that the front part is going to need. Just because something has 5 pseudobulbs doesn't mean it's ready to be divided. Or if you're just removing the back bulbs and you just want to make sure that the front is fine, make sure you have at least, for a Shari baby, 3 healthy bulbs in the back. I'm serious. I'm not saying just because they grow big pseudobulbs, it's okay with 2 or 1. Make sure you have 3. That means your orchid won't stall, and that growth has plenty of energy to grow new and strong. And if the 3rd bulb desiccates, you still have 2 very, very healthy, viable structures as backup. It's going to be fine. There will be no setback, okay? Now, if you want to propagate the back bulbs, just expect that the back bulbs will be a little bit smaller when the new growth comes. But there is no need to be scared about that. Actually, if you've got new roots coming, dive in. Happy days. It's your safest bet. You'll be fine. Promise. And if you have any questions, should the time come, when the time comes, you know where to find me. Any comment under any video, throw it at me. And then if you just need a confirmation, I'm here, okay? Yeah, I should have had a Shari baby. And you know what? I thought I was getting a Shari baby and I mistook it for a sweet sugar. I thought sweet sugar Shari baby. I don't know. Dyslexia kicked in with the excitement of it all. Anywho, so there's one more thing about the temperatures that I wanted to address. Let me see if I can find it. Okay, so we talked about dendrobiums. Now, in the main, as I mentioned, it doesn't matter what orchid is in your collection as long as the minimum is respected and then the highs are respected with the humidity and the airflow. Your temperature tolerance will build itself around what you've got, and you will start to get to know your orchid, which is also a very frustrating statement. When you get orchids in and you're looking for information, everybody says, get to know your orchid. And I'm like, oh, what does that mean? I know all about my orchid. I've read about her. Getting to know your orchid is understanding that maybe one night, points me, you forget to bring your orchid inside and the temperature for you was fine. And then 2 days later, the leaves start to curl and you think, oh, there's no pests, nothing. Curling leaves is a sign of cold. Now, I might be quite okay with what is going on outside right now. That doesn't mean an Eonopsis popcorn horuri, or which was the other one, the Araguensis, curled leaves. It was below 20 degrees Celsius and my orchids got too cold. So this is something that nobody can teach you. You will find that out as per your own personal observation. And even having these orchids in my collection for many years, I forgot. And I've got curly leaves and anthocyanin, and it's just very, very frustrating. And I'm sorry I just made that noise in your ear if you're wearing headphones, but it is so frustrating to forget. Just before the live started, I thought I was going to be late. I thought, oh, my popcorn horuri. And I rushed out, took my headphones off, otherwise I would have dragged the entire equipment off the desk with me to get my popcorn horuri inside. So getting to know your orchid, it is a personal experience. It's something that only you will find out when it happens. Now, 1 mistake, 2 mistakes, it's just going to open your eyes and then you think, oh, that was frustrating. Don't worry about it. The orchid will be fine. You do that for a week, the orchid won't be fine, especially if it's a seedling, okay? So that is what it means to get to know your orchid. It's not something that I can tell you, but if you have something happening that is out of the ordinary and you're going, what is going on here? Then I can tell you what it is if you send me a picture or you want to come up here and show me a picture. Then I can say, whoops, that's cold damage, or, because too much anthocyanin where there shouldn't be any, that's cold damage, etc. So getting to know your orchid, it's the same way on the other temperature range. If you don't have humidity, you've got You've got everything dialed in with your fertilizer and you're still getting brown tips on the leaves. That is a lack of humidity, but because the temperature is way too high. But the airflow is there, your orchid is blooming, the color of the leaves, very important, is adequate. They're not burning, it's fine, okay? Either way. What do I think about Miltoniopsis? I wish I could grow them, Desiree. I think they're very beautiful. Look, if I had the space, back in the day, when I was building this collection, if I had the space, I probably would have bought them because I get them readily available locally. But my temperatures in the summer with my humidity, these two, it doesn't combine. I can't do it. So when I see them in the garden center and they're so abundantly and readily available, my heart sinks. It's really sad. I would have them. Now, I am so glad that back then I had the wherewithal to recognize my conditions, which unfortunately other orchids weren't so lucky. Yes, that I didn't buy any Miltoniopsis into my collection ever. Now, you may say, well, you're growing Dendrobium Victoria Regina, and yes, because she's mounted and I can do a lot of misting. Miltoniopsis wouldn't work for me here, and besides that, they get enormous. You get the conditions right, or even you get the conditions semi-right, then they will grow well for you. So just know that it's a wonderful orchid to grow. The leaves should never be dark brown. They should always have sort of a silvery, bluey kind of hue, not spidermite silver, but they have a different color of leaves than we see on other Oncidiums. That is normal. That's their foliage. And just know they'll get quite big quite quickly. And they're continuous growers as well. Thank you, Robert. Yes, please remember to hit the like. They are continuous growers. So fertilize and water away and happy days. And then get that gorgeous, gorgeous pansy bloom with the rose fragrance, etc. I absolutely adore them. I grow them from a distance though. I see others. 12 pseudobulbs. 12 pseudobulbs. That's like our first orchid, the Grammatophyllum specios. What are you growing that in a bucket? Wow. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. You're going to love dividing that one. Easy 3 pieces with no setback or stalling. Make sure that every piece has at least a growth with new roots starting. Oh, Danny. Jelly much? Jelly much. In my suboptimal specific. Yeah. And then there's some other Oncidiums that don't fare so well. That's right. And here's the thing. When we're talking about temperature, when we're looking, for example, at cool orchids, we discussed some of them yesterday because those are the ones that go into resting mode, obviously, and they go dormant because no leaves. They just bear Medusa style. And that includes Kingianum, Dendrobium kingianum, which is a parent of Dendrobium baryota, but that one holds on to its leaves. So in the Dendrobium genus, there are so many other subgenus sections, but they're all Dendrobiums, and that's where we get this whole fluctuation about why can't I have a Dendrobium doing this, and then the same orchid is doing something else, and it's a Dendrobium elsewhere. So we have, for example, a Kingianum that has leaves, but you keep that outside, and it can take temperatures even below 41 degrees Fahrenheit to the mid 30s. Sorry, I'm back into Fahrenheit. Sorry, I switch. So from 5 degrees Celsius almost to freezing. And that's why a Dendrobium speciosum would do well in my climate. But then, for example, you get the other ones that are like the Dendrobium phalaenopsis. They are up at the opposite end of what I've just mentioned, with the Kingianum that can be outside, they're cold. Hey, Chris. Woohoo, Chris Sun. Orchid Ninja Chris Sun is in the house. Good to see you. Thank you for being here. Never apologize. This is a city bus. Hop on, hop off, whenever. We're here. As long as we're here, please never, ever apologize. It's good to see you. Thank you for coming in. We're at the opposite end of the spectrum. That is the Dendrobium phalaenopsis that don't want a temperature ever at night below 15 degrees Celsius. And that includes in the pot, not just the leaves, where we're back to evaporative cooling. So heat mats are a wonderful thing. They work really, really well. Just don't confuse your orchid with a heat mat, keeping its roots nice and toasty, and then your ambient air doesn't match, because that will cause leaf drop to happen very quickly, especially when we talk about dendrobiums who are super fussy. What do we got? Yep, Sandy is going to show us paradise. That's going to be amazing. I can't wait to hear Sandy say, my first box of orchids has arrived, because I'll be doing cartwheels around the patio. So yeah, when you do your research, just make sure that you know you can provide minimum temperatures, and then your learning curve will be the temperature tolerance in your environment when it comes to how much humidity and how much airflow. Know that when it rains, you can switch your humidifiers off if you can open your windows. It's simples. I do happen to enjoy my winters because my humidity rises. Of course, the cold temperatures don't help, but at least I've got humidity, and that helps some of the orchids that are outside. Whereas, then we find a balance for indoors. But yeah, if you've got heavy rainfall and your orchids are indoors and it's somewhat agreeable, open the window, let some of that fresh humidity in, switch off your fans, save yourself some energy on the utility bills. Righty-ho. Questions? Anybody? I didn't put the questions option up either at all, for which I do apologize. But again, I do remind everybody that you are always, always welcome to come up, and we can talk about anything and everything regarding the topic for tonight. Simply because it makes it easier for anybody that's watching any of these videos back on replay to be able to follow the subject and have at least, a flow without us veering off too much into some kind of, orchid jibber jabber, which I want to do. One night we are going to be doing orchid jibber jabber and anything goes. And I really, really want to encourage people to come up and we talk, not just me, we talk. That's all part and parcel of these videos. So I've been pretty much able to keep up with the questions, and I'm so proud of myself, seeing as I was, for whatever reason, very nervous at the beginning of this stream. Throw me into the orchid world and suddenly everything disappears. I could do, the Buddha, the Om thing right now. I'm so happy. Why does new growth turn black? Calcium, lack of calcium, or water within the bracts of the new growth. If water went in and you still have plenty of your calcium applications are on point, then if the water gets in there without enough airflow, they don't have a chance to dry out. That's a bad sign. If you have everything else dialed in, no water got into the crown, everything was perfect, you've got plenty of airflow, and the new growths go black, that is a lack of calcium, and then that needs to be supplemented. Exactly, Danny. Same here. Exactly the same reason. And then they just go downhill. And you can put as much water into a Miltoniopsis pot. You can do that until you're blue in the face. First of all, the roots will start to rot out because you're trying to compensate because of lack of humidity, and they are very thirsty. I mean, they'll grow a big root system. They love their root system. But too much of a good thing is too much of a good thing, even for us humans. I didn't say that. But anyway, So yeah, it's a shame. And like I said, I'm so, so glad I had the wherewithal not to buy them. And I feel so bad for every Miltoniopsis I see on the bench. And I figured I would put a little bit of my October Bloom extravaganza on the screen instead of having that bubble face going constantly. So yeah, absolutely. But what I want to do tomorrow, unless I hear from somebody otherwise, and I don't have my email on, I have everything on mute so that I don't get pings and alerts into the sound and the audio. Unless I don't have anybody saying they want to join me for a live stream tomorrow, we're going to be doing something not really orchid related. It's going to be the personal like live stream. I'm going to go on Google Earth and we're going to explore my high school, my surroundings, and we're going to talk about that. If anybody is still interested, I know that 2 or 3 people in this chat are interested, and I would even do it just for one. But I would like to get that somewhat out of the way because it could be a long one. And that means, of course, there could be more questions. And then I want to be able to plan our lives for next week and see if I need to do a follow-up. So that's what I'm planning for tomorrow night. And it's going to be silly o'clock, I know, but I need to honor those that are in Australia. I miss those guys. I feel like they always get the short end of the sticks. Your comments don't work. I feel so bad for everybody that is in Europe, because who wants to be up at 12:30 midnight, which is Central European time is when I'm going to schedule it. But I feel so bad for everybody over there in Australia. And even last night featuring the Queen of Sheba, you know, I thought I should actually do that with an Australian time zone in mind. But when it comes to these kinds of lives, yeah, you know, Saturday night, if this were to extend longer than what could be, then at least I can sort of sleep in on Sunday and I don't have the gardener shredding the hedge at 7 o'clock in the morning, you know what I mean? Oh, meanwhile, it could be that long and I'll say, good morning, giddy mooning. I appreciate that, Fernanda. I've been thinking of you and I feel so bad. But you know what? I am not impartial to throwing up a live any time of the week either. I'm not. You know, sometimes it's the Europeans that get the short end of the sticks when Americans do things, and you know, being smack in the middle. I feel so bad for the Australians, and I really want them in there because their orchids are so varied, and we don't see these kinds of things. Well, I do now because I have a book to look at thanks to Julie's orchids, but oh, their orchids are amazing. So comments don't blue. My comment, yeah, there's a character limit, Anna. I'm sorry about that. And YouTube has this funny knack, not just on videos to erase comments. YouTube erases comments from chat as well, and I don't even see them. Somebody says I can't see my comment, and I'm like, I can't see your comment either. So it's all YouTube. We need Australians in our community. We need to give them a voice, really, because they have a really hard time sourcing orchids. When they source orchids, they are out of the flask. It is really strict over there. And I just feel it's so unfair, the amount of effort they put into their orchids. And then, you know, we're all messing around here. And yeah, no, I will be up until the cows come home for the Australians if they can make it. And if they can't, at least I'm trying. Okay, your anyway, the blooms on my maxi have sent, and one of my Renanth has a, what? That is fantastic. I'm glad to hear that. So your Maxillaria has a fragrance. Does it smell like caramel? Cousin, it doesn't have any eau de cologne. He's just got manly plant smell. I heard that Maxillarias have a caramel fragrance. At least the Orchid Room said that back in the day with her variabilis. Thank you, Robert. I appreciate that. Thank you. And by the way, you know, you're not obliged to be here. As you can see, I've put everything on subscribers only so that we don't get those dirty people in here. Okay, let's see. Or at least they have to spend some time if they want to bypass that. At least I hope. And if it doesn't work with the 10 minutes, I'm putting it to a full day. I don't care. Yeah, what time tomorrow? Okay, my time 12:30 midnight, as in, let me see. Let me see now. I don't want to be presumptuous, but let me see. It would be, wait, now don't let my dyslexia get ahead of me. 27th of November, my time at 12:30 a.m. in, hang on a second. Sorry guys, let me just check this out, please. Okay, so that would be 6:30 in Ottawa. I don't know if that helps. Sandy, 6:30 p.m. in Ottawa. I don't know exactly where you are. I know you remember. Oh, thank you, Danya. That's awesome. I remember that. I know you told me, but those are the details I try to forget very quickly, so I don't one day, blurt it out and make a mistake. 8 a.m. Mountain Time. Wait. Okay. So 12:30 a.m. my time on the 27th. When I put out the notification, you will get the alert and it will show you your time when the stream will go live. It won't show you my time, okay? All right. What time it is? All the alerts show local time where you are at, not mine. That's 4:30 p.m. for you. Männlich. Smells very, very like a man, okay? Sandy, let me know. 4:30 p.m. That would be your local time. Männlich. Masculine. Maxillaria picta smells masculine. Okay. Okay. That's right. 6:30 p.m. Eastern. That is correct. That I can throw out there without even having to look it up. What time have I got right now? It's 11 p.m. and it's still the 25th, Friday the 25th. So yeah. Any questions? Anybody? If not that I'm trying to rush it. Danny, you are so welcome. I am so glad that you are here. I'm glad that you had questions, and I'm even more glad I could answer them. How about that? Happy days, we're all winning. I so appreciate it. But yeah, I don't want to be, waffling on, babbling on, jibber-jabbering on. I think I've pretty much covered everything in this part. If anything comes to mind, we can also do a backup, a follow-up. But yeah, I think that after this, maybe I could plan for a live next week when it comes to recipe for setups based on environment, something like that. One thing I can do as well is that's because the recipe for a setup is something I've been wanting to do in a video for the longest time. The last 6 weeks just have been bonkers. I cannot tell you, just nuts. So anyway, I want you to be safe. Above all things, please be safe. Enjoy the rest of your Friday. Enjoy the rest of your evening. Obrigado to Portugal. Thank you so very, very much for being here. Vielen herzlichen Dank und Bussi an Österreich. Ein bisschen von dem Wiener Schmäh. Mein Deutsch macht es nicht ganz, ne. Ich habe nicht die Klasse dafür. Robert, my wingman, thank you so, so much. I so appreciate you. You make sure that you take care of yourself and make sure that the back clock's back in. I hope digesting was amazing. And I hope if you had any leftovers and sandwiches that they were just as good, if not better, than the main meal itself. Have yourselves a wonderful, wonderful rest of whatever it is that you're going to do. Just make sure, please, that you stay safe. Thank you for your support. Thank you for being here. And if you haven't already, hit the like button on your way out. I hope to see you tomorrow. If not, in the comments section. Take care. Bye.